Hello, my name is Bob Nguyen. I'm currently an English educator working in Turkey. I specialize in teaching English as a foreign language with an emphasis on social issues and technology. There's been a lot of changes in my life, of movements and wanderings, of setbacks and growths, and a lot of learning along the way. I was born in Vietnam, a country that has had a long history of being the underdog, a country that emerged from the shadows of many great disasters, mostly man made. The war isn't often discussed by people anymore. It's hard to get my parents to tell stories of the old country, but here and there, glimpses of a story emerge. Vietnam is a country of karst mountains, rice paddies, and now skyscrapers that straddle the South China Sea. Its people are open and resilient after undergoing a long history of being colonized, occupied, and invaded, and yet they continue to adapt, develop, and accept guests as if they were cousins. My family left Vietnam when I was 6 months old. My outspoken father was opposed to the communist government in Vietnam and attempted to escape with my mother and brother before I was born. But they were caught and he was jailed in a re education camp. He sacrificed for his family, and I was born while he was in jail. We eventually fled Vietnam and ended up in a refugee camp in Taiwan for almost 2 years, longer than I had lived in Vietnam. Eventually, after being sponsored by a family in California, we boarded an airplane and made it to California. I was 2 years old, and we didn't have much in terms of belongings. I grew up between two worlds, the culture of my parents and of my adopted home. We ended up in Southern California in Little Saigon, the largest diaspora outside of Vietnam. I blended the cultural values of collective harmony with my new American individualism. What was created blended with the people that I met. We shared hamburgers and bowls of pho, Vietnamese beef noodle soup, with friends whose parents came from all over the world. We grew up in the melting pot, and sometimes it was a bit too hot to take. Well, just don't stand there. Come inside. Turn to go back to your country. And we learned what it meant to be different. And so I learned. In the walls of a school or in the stillness of my bedroom, it was a safe space, hidden behind books. It was a place that I could compete against bigger kids, richer kids. It was a place that I could turn inwards and be by myself. It was my way out of the neighborhood that I grew up in and out of the inequality I saw around me. From the events of my past and the things I've experienced, my values are based around the idea of justice. I've seen a lot of inequality growing up in the suburbs of Orange County. The sense of justice comes from growing up in poverty, experiencing racism firsthand, and witnessing it in the world around me. It has led me to become a teacher, an educator who believes in the worth of all students. I have traveled far and wide to teach and learn about other cultures. I taught at two middle schools in a rural town in northern Japan. I learned about patience and cooperation during the earthquake and tsunami in 2011. In Ethiopia, I was an education volunteer through the Peace Corps, serving in the city of Mekelle. I once again experienced a new form of differentness and the alienation that comes from it. The high school students I taught at the time accepted my teaching and my humanness, which helped me to stay throughout a state of emergency in the country. And finally, in Turkey, I experienced a pandemic alongside an amazing group of students who have been companions on this uncertain journey. Will continue on as a teacher. It is through education that people carve a path towards understanding and making sense of their world, and it will be through education that we find the solutions to solve the greatest problems. During this time of pandemic, it has been more dramatically revealed who lacks access to basic needs in life, whether it is in education without access to computers and internet, with jobs, who is considered essential and who is not, or the availability of food and shelter. Blacks have seen more disparities at this time. Most notably, the rate of infection for the disease has been higher for Black Americans, and they are the ones who lack access to free or even affordable health care. All Americans living in the most prosperous country in the world should have free access to health care, all Americans, and they should be allowed to live without fear of violence. The violence against black Americans needs to end. Budgets need to be reallocated in order to better serve the community. Instead of spending billions on fighting crime, cure diseases with free clinics. Instead of arming police with riot gear, provide people with access to healthy food. Instead of locking up black Americans on petty charges, provide wellness programs. The U.S. has had a long history of racism. So far, there is no vaccine for this disease that makes people hate others. But there is education. There are countless incidences of people's bravery changing the course of history. There have been movements that have raised awareness of issues in society. Be a part of these groups. I think that I've been silent for too long, that the empty white canvas of silence leaves too much room for others to mark. When I saw someone wearing a hat with the word Aryan on it, I didn't say anything. When my friend's brother, a firefighter, and his brother-in-law, a police officer, joked about the death of Eric Garner, I didn't stand up to them. Humans are imperfect. When I was young, my parents told me that I couldn't go to a friend's birthday party because he was black. I don't know how they knew he was black, and I didn't understand the reasoning behind it at the time, but I was confused. Years later, my parents would be cheering for Obama when he became president. My parents have come a long way, but they still have a ways to go. We all have a long way to go still as a people. The last few months have tested us in so many ways. I believe that there are bullies and the bullied, and from the bullied there are two people, the ones that become bullies themselves or the ones that stand up against the bullies. All the events from my birth to my childhood to my education have brought me on the path that I am on now. Every decision has had its consequences. Every mistake has made me wiser. Now, I'm teaching you all to stand up against the bullies. No matter how terrifying the darkness can be, there's always light from the education that we receive.